My name's Ailsa Rutter. I'm the director of Fresh and Balance, which is the regional tobacco control programme in the northeast of England, funded by our local authorities and our integrated care board. The Gold Command paper that was published on the 4th of October, in my own personal perspective, is probably one of the most powerful, brilliantly written pieces of rationale for why we need to go further on smoking, and the reality of 2 and 3 long-term smokers sadly dying from completely avoidable smoking related illness. And I think this sense of scale of how much progress we've made over recent decades on smoking, but the recognition that there is still so much to be done is testament to the hard work of so many people here today, and the fact that I think we're expecting 600 to join the webinar. Um, a huge thanks to everybody who has made this a possibility, and specifically I'd really like to thank the CMO for Professor Sir Chris Whitty's leadership on all of this topic area, and appreciate him for taking time out both today and also yesterday when there was an online meeting with the Public Health Minister Neil O'Brien, and so many charities and key national organisations were there to lend their support to this. So just wearing my fresh hat, really, it's just the timing of this is really quite perfect. Just 2 weeks ago in the Northeast, we did launch a bold, ambitious ambition for a completely smoke-free future, free of tobacco-related disease and death, and that was a joint bold ambition between the Association of Directors of Public Health in the Northeast and our ICB. And I think it just shows that so many of us on this call today have been personally affected by smoking. We absolutely get that this is so important from a health inequalities point of view, that we do all we can to end the burden of that on this. And I'm sure everybody here today wants to lend huge amount of support to the government for this bold ambition, to make sure that this is a success, and also to continue to focus on smoking as a key cross-party issue and as a key driver of health inequalities. So the next slide will just quickly show you who the lineup of fantastic speakers are this afternoon. And then at the end of this, we will have a Q&A, an opportunity for you to ask some really important questions and also some next steps. And we're going to hear from a range of perspectives, and, delighted to have Professor Sir Chris Whitty in a moment, and then Sarah Price to give an NHS perspective, Simon Bryant to give the perspective as a Director of Public Health. We have Kate Pike from a trading standards viewpoint. We've got Councillor Jim Dixon from a local councillor perspective. And then really importantly, towards the end, we'll have the Deputy Chief Executive of ASH, Hazel, going through some of the key points for the consultation and the next steps, and then there will be a Q&A. We are going to record the webinar to make it available for those that can't attend and to watch it back. The next slide was just to summarise on the housekeeping. So it's being recorded. Please can all panellists and attendees keep themselves muted and turn their videos off unless they're presenting. ASH staff will mute anyone who's unmuted and not presenting. Please put your questions into the chat, any reflections into the meeting chat as well, to be discussed during the Q&A, and any other issues, please, post into the meeting chat or email admin@smokefreeaction.org.uk. Hazel's just kindly asked me to pull together a slide which summarises what some of the key announcements are. I'm not going to at all steal the thunder of what Professor Whitty will be then saying, but just for one slide here, the overview of the announcements was the really phenomenal plan to bring forward legislation to make it an offence to sell tobacco products to anyone born on or after the 1st of January 2009, a very welcome additional package of investment to support smokers to quit, including doubling of the funding for Stop Smoking services, an additional investment for the anti-smoking marketing campaigns, and we're absolutely thrilled by that. Measures to address youth vaping, and then also plans to strengthen enforcement, including £30 million new funding each year for enforcement agencies. So without further ado, I will hand over to Professor Sir Chris Whitty. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me start off with the really, in a sense, obvious but very important point. Why did the Prime Minister choose to prioritise this issue, which I think all of us have recognised for a long time is major? And he chose to do this because throughout people's life course, right from the beginning, where stillbirths are significantly increased with smoking, all the way through the life course, children being affected by asthma, major problems of cardiovascular diseases, heart disease, heart failure, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, many cancers, obviously lung cancer, but many other cancers as well, through to dementia in the last years of life. Smoking substantially increases the risk. So it causes major disability, massively reduces quality of life, and hastens death by often years or decades. So it's an appalling risk factor and heavily skewed towards bits of the country living in deprivation and people living in relative poverty. So it is a problem which is absolutely enormous everywhere. And the second reason is that the great majority of smokers wish they'd never started. I know this is sometimes people try to make this an issue about choice. Their choice has been taken away by addiction, usually in younger years. So over 80% of all smokers have started smoking in their teenage years or childhood. So this is an issue we absolutely need to address. And that is something which I think the Prime Minister has demonstrated his leadership on. There's clear leadership from the other political parties. This gets cross-party support, not from every individual person, but really from all the major parties as well. Now, let's just run through what the Prime Minister announced, and then in more detail what's in the command paper. And I would encourage people to read the command paper put together by an absolutely fantastic team between Department of Health and Social Care and the Cabinet Office. And I think it lays it out in some detail. But in the key elements are, firstly, recognizing that the great majority of smokers start in their teenage years, steadily to raise the age of sale, so that anyone aged 14 or younger now will never illegally be able to buy a cigarette or to have it bought for them. So that is the first issue. It does not criminalise smoking, and it's very important we make that clear, and it does not remove the right to smoke from anyone who currently has it. Again, we need to make that clear, I think. But those are the that is the first bit of the package. Secondly, because many smokers, the majority, if you look over the last 5 years, of smokers wish to quit, additional resources, doubling of resources for existing smokers to help them quit by whatever route works for them. That might be vaping, it might be other mechanisms. Some people just stop straight off, but whatever mechanisms are needed, most people need support, and this is to help them get that support done through local authorities. And this money will be distributed roughly based on the prevalence of smoking in the particular area, which is also, unfortunately, a proxy for deprivation. The third element is an increase in the budget for awareness raising, advertising, issues of that sort, again to highlight the main issues and signpost to people ways that current smokers can quit, and people who are not smokers can be encouraged to realise the reasons they absolutely should not do that, thereby putting themselves in the hands of companies which are choosing to addict them, and therefore in many ways take their choices away. And then the final element, but a very important element, is I think everybody would agree that marketing of vapes to children is utterly unacceptable, but that is very clearly happening. And you look at any vape shops anywhere where vapes are being promoted, many of these are clearly being marketed at children. And this is not just they're being marketed at children, the rates of vaping are going up in children. This means the risk is that a new generation become addicted to nicotine, even if they're not then smoking. So a lesser evil, but still something which no parent, no responsible teacher or others is going to want to see. So there are a series of measures, and this is where there will be some debate, but about where the right balance is to make sure that smoking, those who smoke find it much more attractive and easier and cheaper to vape, because that is substantially less risky than smoking, but that those who are not smoking, and particularly children, are not encouraged to vape just as a lifestyle thing, which will turn into an addiction, which they are very likely also to regret. And so there's a significant consultation on at the moment, and I would encourage anybody to register their individual views and their organisation's views, both on the age of sale issues. The financial package isn't being consulted on because that's just a decision by government, but also on these vaping issues and getting the balance right, on colours, on flavours, on point of sale, and also on the role of disposables, which some smokers find useful and probably has a role in particular subsets, but also has dominated the children-focused market, and I think has additional environmental reasons why, for example, local authorities find them very tricky. But I think it's important that all views are reasonably represented, and then I think government is going to have to make a choice. That element in law, so what is going to happen is that the current intention, with all the usual caveats, is for this to go to Parliament probably early next year, after the consultation is closed and the government has had a chance to respond to it and think it through. And the age of sale will be a straight, this is on the face of the bill, and then the other areas will be taking powers, so that government, if we either push it too far in one direction or too far in another, there is a possibility for ministers to take a decision to change things subsequently to some degree. So there's a bit more flexibility built into the way that it's currently going to Parliament. Obviously, ultimately, it's a question for Parliament to decide, and it'll be debated. Now, what can people do to support this? Well, the most important thing has already been done in a way, which is compiling the evidence on which this is based and making the case, which very many of the organisations represented on the call today have done brilliantly over very many years. But it is important that people respond to the consultation, absolutely essential that we do that. Secondly, it is important that we make clear to MPs and others that this gets very wide support across all of the health sector, and indeed is widely supported by the public. Depending which polling organisation you look at, somewhere between 65 and 75% of the public already think these are sensible proposals in every age group and in every area of the country, and indeed in every political direction. So we need to make sure that the case for this is made really clear to people. And we need to engage respectfully but firmly in this debate to make sure that people are aware of the strength of feeling and, more importantly, the strength of evidence in this area. I'll stop there because really what I want to hear was from other people, but that lays out, I think, where we are at the moment.
That was absolutely fantastic and just so clearly put in the rationale and the clear steps that are underway. So thank you so much. Can I now turn to Sarah, please, to give her perspective from Greater Manchester and NHS? Thank you.
Thank you, Ailsa, and thank you for asking me to join the webinar this afternoon. So I think the reasons for the NHS participating both in the consultation and supporting this work rolling out overlap with lots of other people's reasons for doing so. In Greater Manchester, we've had a Making Smoking History approach since 2018, and it's been absolutely central to our approach to being a Marmot City region, trying to really improve health inequalities for those that we're here to support. And at that outset of our first strategy, we talked to nearly 8,000 people across all 10 of our local authority areas, and 4 out of 5 of those people agreed that they wanted to make smoking history, that it all made sense to them. And we've worked really hard with local communities, the voluntary community and faith, social enterprise sectors, and localities across Greater Manchester to create a movement for a smoke-free future. And so we strongly believe that stakeholders and the public alike in Greater Manchester will support the consultation and the cross-party consensus to deliver a smoke-free generation. And that helps us deliver our role as the NHS. So as part of our missions as an integrated care partnership, it will help us to put health and well-being back into our communities. It'll improve our population's physical and mental health. It'll help people to get and stay in work, boosting productivity, and relieve both system and financial pressures on the health and social care system and its staff. So the 30% of our productivity gap in the north and in GM is health related, and adds up to in 3 smokers die early, half of those in middle age. Smoking has a significant impact on this. So 150,000 of our GM smokers are currently living with smoking related ill health, so drawing on health and care services. And the estimated cost to our economy of smoking is now 898 million a year in lost productivity, and nearly 15,000 people out of work due to smoking related ill health. So it really is on all of us to change this position. So that smoke free by 2030 ambition that we've signed up for will really help increase healthy life expectancy by 6 years for men and 7 years for women, 5 years ahead of the 2035 target. And we're really keen to do that. This approach, this proposed legislation will really make a big difference for us in trying to achieve that. The NHS return on investment case for investment in tobacco control is stronger than in almost any other area of prevention. I'm sure many of the people on this call truly understand that. And better treatment outcomes if you give up smoking, the evidence has been there for a very long time, whether it's cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, maternity or mental health. The benefit is not just of the person who smokes, but also to the NHS as a whole. And I think making that case strongly, particularly at this time of financial constraint, is one that we really need to emphasise. The long-term plan for the NHS set out clear commitments to improve prevention and tackling avoidable illness through treating tobacco dependency, and that those services need to grow. Some of the things that sat in that plan were pioneered here in Greater Manchester. What we call Cure programme, so offering support to everyone who goes into hospital who's a smoker. That's been rolled out across all our trusts now, including our mental health hospitals. And we've got a comprehensive smoke-free pregnancy programme, which has reduced smoking at time of delivery by a third, an additional 4,500 smoke-free babies and their families. So it is the blueprint for the new national incentive scheme going forward, and must be a way that we use this debate to support going forward. And while all our stop smoking offers to adults include the offer of vapes, we did pilot the first swap to stop vape scheme in Salford. We do absolutely support stronger regulation of vapes to protect children and young people from ever vaping, and is a vital part of the consultation for all of us to respond to, and certainly the NHS and GM will be doing that. NHS organisations do have a critical opportunity to respond to this government consultation and transform the lives of health of their communities. And we will be developing our response with engagement with local stakeholders, including clinical and resident voices. And we'll encourage all our NHS and wider public sector and VC FSE partners to respond to the consultation too. And we'll be sharing resources with people to be able to help them to do that. And as an ICB, we've been highlighting support for the consultation on social media over the last 2 weeks with PR, etc. We know how important this local debate is in creating culture change as part of that wider making smoking history shift, as we saw with smoke-free legislation. So I think it's really the NHS we're ready to help and support as we move forward. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and it's always fantastic to hear the great work underway in GM and that super local working. And I think just you're emphasising this is important for health, wealth, social care, economy, workplaces, and etc. This whole system approach, so really helpful. I'm now going to move on to Simon, who's going to give DPH perspective from Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So obviously the role of directors of public health and your leadership is crucial. So over to you now to share your thoughts.
Many thanks, and that is really helpful to hear the previous speakers really set out the case for change and why we're doing this. And I think, as I said, the facts are very well known. We've known it for some time, and this really gives us some momentum to make us and help us move to the next step of reducing smoking prevalence in our communities. This is a moment in time and it matters. As Association of Directors of Public Health and as a local Director of Public Health, smoking is a really important thing that we tackle, and we're doing a lot of work at local level as the local leaders of public health. And this paper really helps us to do that. What we want to do and what we need to do is build local momentum, both around the consultation, but also around the actions. We'll be working with local leaders, local MPs, as Chris Whitty set out, and NHS colleagues to really build up that work we are doing locally, using the new investments to help reduce the number of people who are smoking in our populations. It's a really important issue. I think there has been some slight kind of change in the last, this has certainly changed it, but people say, oh, smoking's gone away, it's not a problem. We know it's a problem, we know we want to tackle it, and a smoke-free generation is what we want to do. We want to prevent people starting smoking, and we want to help those who are smoking to give up. And as local leaders, we're using this consultation and this new momentum behind the new legislation to really move forward on smoking and to tackle smoking. It's been really helpful to see our allocations around smoking cessation, and we need to work together with partners across the system, across our local systems, to really ensure that money is used well. It can tackle inequalities and can also help to increase the number of people able to give up smoking, and that's really important. We need to do that together, and we need to tackle inequalities. We know for a number of years that actually those people who are smoking now have been addicted for some time. We need to really think about how we support those, how we engage with those, using insight and engagement from our populations, who we know well as local directors of public health, to really tackle and support those to give up, and also prevent young people from starting. As we know, this is an addiction. It's not easy to make a behaviour change, but we, as local leaders with our smoking cessation services, will be at the forefront of that work to help reduce the number of people smoking and move this forward. So we really, really welcome this, and we will be working with colleagues both nationally and locally to talk about the consultation, talk about the good work, talk about how we can move this forward and how we want to work together. I know locally already there's been papers going to councils to really provide support, and we'll continue that work locally as we work together with both education, with our trading standards colleague, our NHS colleagues, all through the system, so that actually we are clearly committed to making this work and making this a success. So thank you, Ailsa. I will stop there.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Simon. And just a huge thanks to all of the directors of public health and the association at national level, plus all of the regional branches of that as well, for their phenomenal leadership and their support around, you know, absolutely recognising how vital the focus on tobacco is. I'm now going to pass over to Kate Pike, who's going to give us, you know, she's got a wealth of experience from her trading standards perspective. So I'm going to hand over to Kate and her perspectives now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ailsa. Trading standards very much welcome the proposal to create a smoke-free generation. We have for many years supported our colleagues in public health to protect our communities from the harms that tobacco bring. For a number of years, we've been supporting an increase in the age of sale of tobacco to recognise the uniquely harmful nature of the product. Our role will be to advise and support business in the run-up to January 2027, when the new law will take effect, and then to ensure we take robust enforcement action against anyone who persistently flouts the law and sells to anyone born on or after the 1st of January 2009. We are considering our response to the consultation at the moment, but we also wanted to consider whether it might be the right time to introduce mandatory age verification to support retailers, to ensure that when they have a customer coming in who say that they were born before the 1st of January 2009, they can see the date of birth, and they may be able to so they will see straight away whether they are allowed to sell to them or not. There are those who say British people don't carry ID, but I think young people, my children, always carry ID. It's very normal for them to be asked to show it. So I think that's something that could be considered at the same time. With regards to youth vaping, the Chartered Trading Standards Institute has already made a robust response to the call for evidence. We'll be calling on that for our response to this consultation. Our approach will be how to make any regulations practically enforceable while still achieving the outcomes of reducing attractiveness and availability to young people, protecting the environment, and ensuring products are available to smokers looking to quit. And I think there is a lot that can be done while still achieving many of those outcomes. For example, this morning I just looked on the MHRA published list of nominally compliant products for flavour descriptors. I looked at strawberry, which we know is a flavour which is favoured by smokers looking to move away from tobacco. And I found sweet strawberry, salty strawberry, naughty strawberry, strawberry bubblegum, strawberry ice, strawberry blast, smiley strawberry, umami strawberry, red mist, and that was just on the first page of my search, and there were several hundred pages. So it's highlighted that flavour descriptors is really important, obviously in attracting potentially young consumers. Branding is important. We need to ensure that any new regulations are carefully written so that breaches are clear and there are few, if any, loopholes. Trading standards absolutely support and recommend that 0% nicotine products are included in age of sale regimes. Also, in any restrictions on branding and displays, particularly for short fill liquids, it would be extremely undermining to see such products covered in cartoon characters with gimmicks and lights and stickers on the shelves. They just need an under-the-counter nicotine shot added, and then they become a nicotine-containing product. In terms of enforcement, we very much welcome the consultation proposal to introduce fixed penalty notices. Don't forget that when we carry out underage sales enforcement, it's based on intelligence. We don't just pop into the local corner shop on the off chance we can catch them out. We carefully plan underage sales enforcement activity based on complaints received from the public and other retailers, partners such as schools. So when we actually do get an evidential result, one where we could issue a penalty notice or take a prosecution, that shop will already have sold on a number of occasions. So the starting point for the FPM should recognise that. And we'd also like to potentially see a sliding scale so that increased amounts could be levied against persistent offenders. And we'd also like to see non-payment being a criminal offence in itself. As trading standards officers, we are passionate about protecting our communities, and we welcome the opportunity to support our colleagues in public health and across the framework to create a smoke-free generation so that in years to come, people can live lives which are not blighted by the harm which tobacco brings.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. And I think it's just always really helpful that we remind ourselves of the absolutely unique lethal nature of cigarettes. What other product known in the history of humankind is guaranteed to kill 2 and 3 of its long-term users? And I think the leadership of trading standards over many decades and CTSI absolutely recognising that has been so incredibly useful. Before I move on to Councillor Dixon, and I think fantastic that we're going to have his perspective and also chair as the London Tobacco Alliance, and how welcome that is. Just a comment, just in terms of a lot of the things that are in the chat, I will just draw the attention at this point in time that there is significant research, and we are exceptionally lucky in the UK to have the OHID commissioned reviews in terms of vaping, looking at all of the research around the country, around the world, sorry. Many of the questions in the chat, I think if people take the time to look at the OHID reviews, they will find that those questions are answered very well. And also, I think earlier on in the chat, there is a Mythbuster guide has also been shared by Ash, but I think let's focus predominantly here on tobacco remaining our biggest killer. And we absolutely all recognise that we want to do what we can to reduce youth access to vaping, but it's proven that vaping is helping smokers to quit. So anyways, on that note, I'm going to move on to Councillor Dixon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ailsa. And like colleagues from Manchester and Hampshire, for instance, have already said, I think it's really important that the voice of local government, and in particular elected members, is heard in the response to the government proposals. As a member myself of the London Tobacco Alliance, and I'm chair, as you said, of the Smoke-Free Councillors Network in London, obviously it goes without saying that I'm supportive. But I think it's also really clear that I'm not alone, and the great majority of elected members and their councils are really enthusiastic about the plans. And the key thing is that we mobilise local government and its partners to make their voice heard during the response and the wider debate around the proposals that clearly is going on. And local government leaders really shouldn't need too much additional encouragement when they can see what their residents think. And Ash have helpfully posted a good cross-section of public opinion, and you can see that across all political parties there's very clear majorities in favour of the proposals. And perhaps some people might find it surprising that actually Conservative voters are more strongly in favour than those of any other party. So really encouraging to see. So no reasons for local authorities not to really act on this, but the problem, as people will know very well, is that the span of responsibilities and the huge level of day-to-day activity experience in local government mean it's not always easy to get the airtime and the attention of individual councils, even for really critically important local issues such as this one. So there clearly is a very big job to be done to ensure that councils are really fully seized of the fact that they need to make their voices fully heard over the next few months. And I think everyone on this call can be key advocates for that to happen. So I would be encouraging colleagues who work in councils, our elected members, those with influence on them, to be suggesting that local authorities do a range of things to demonstrate their support and their readiness to implement the key parts of the proposals. And some of the most effective ways councils can do this, and the kind of things I'd suggest pressing local authorities to do, probably fall into 4 categories. So I think the first one is just absolutely make sure your local council submits a supportive consultation response, that it really brings to bear the council and its public health team's knowledge of the issues, their engagement with local residents, the health data, the effect on the local economy and poverty, and also their experience around enforcement. All that needs to go in and be really authoritative in terms of a voice for their local area. And I'd certainly suggest that if you're advocating to a local authority, the pivotal people are going to be the lead member for health and the director of public health, in terms of making sure that they are doing what they should be doing. I think that can certainly be supported by a motion to council which commits the organisation to support the proposals and really helps galvanise action across the council, and enables the response of the government to say, for instance, and I think this is really powerful, we have cross-party support, in fact often unanimous support from all our elected members for the response we're making and in favour of the government proposals. And again, I think the fact this is a Conservative government proposing things which perhaps have been slightly more typical of what Labour governments have done is so powerful in that. I also think councils are really influential in making up the mind of local MPs to support the legislation. I mean, for instance, in London, I think it's pretty inconceivable that most of our MPs won't be absolutely supportive, but that won't be true everywhere. So I think there's a really important role for advocacy on the way those MPs will vote when the proposals get to Parliament. And then I think finally, councils can really spread the word amongst residents about the proposals, and that can encourage individual responses, which I think are very important. And you often find within those individual responses some really moving personal stories, for instance, of the role cigarettes have played in addiction within families, and how it's so important that we break that cycle. And these can form part of the response, and I think they're powerful. And I think that whole conversation can really shift the dial on local sentiment. And I think social media has a part to play here too. So your MPs with their 50,000 Twitter and Instagram followers, council media accounts, which put out information all the time to their local communities, and of course, old-fashioned legacy media, stories in the local and regional media, material provided at service outlets to say the consultation's happening and people can give their views. All of that, I think, makes a real difference. So you need to make sure your local authorities are doing those things. So I think the bottom line is really, from me, is to advocate your local authority and your political representatives really do get behind this and really do advocate strongly for the reforms, both in their consultation responses, but at the right moment in Parliament.
Thank you so much, Councillor Dixon. There's some really practical, tangible things actually that partners can do here, and the importance of things like social media accounts and reaching out to some of our key politicians, including narrative on Twitter, etc. I'm now going to hand over to Hazel Cheeseman, the Deputy Chief Executive of ASH, who's going to be talking through some of the things that the mighty team of ASH will be doing, and then we will open up the Q&A after that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ailsa, and thank you to everybody. It's been a really fascinating webinar, and hopefully we can have I'll try and talk super quickly and we can get to have some questions. So I'm just going to kind of race through what some of the kind of key framing is from our point of view, and the case for engagement, if you're not already convinced by all those that have already spoken, and then some of the tools that Ash, with support from others, which I'll talk more about, will be producing to help people navigate the consultation process and the wider campaigning and communication strategy. Okay, so first of all, I just want to focus on why it is that we need to take action, particularly focused on this policy of raising the age of sale 1 year every year. It is a policy area which I think both the public MPs are less familiar with, perhaps, than other parts of the debate around smoking and vaping, and I'll talk a little bit more about vaping. So I think it's really important that we do engage and inform the public and MPs on this, so that they really, as the CMO was saying right at the beginning, so people are really familiar with what the evidence says and the strength of the evidence here. I would also say that time is of the essence. If we are to pass legislation, or if Parliament is to pass legislation ahead of an election, whenever that may be next year, it's tight. And so, we need to keep the momentum up and keep communicating how important this policy area is. And there's also a clear kind of political imperative. So while Labour are going to be supporting this policy and whipping MPs, so requiring them to vote in support of it, that won't be the case. It's a free vote for Conservatives. Conservatives will be free to vote as they choose, and it's not clear yet what the Liberal Democrat position will be. So it's really, really important that we get out there and make sure that MPs understand the strength of support in their communities and among health organisations for this policy. And it's really, really important from our point of view that there is strong cross-party support. There has been strong cross-party support for all the measures that have recently passed in Parliament, and we wouldn't want this to be anything other than that. So quickly, on the framing, making the case, this is a policy that is needed, wanted and workable, and I am building on what others have said and rather I'm summarising it in rather brutally here. Clearly smoking is a uniquely addictive and lethal product, and I'll talk more about how important it is for us to be having that conversation with the public. It is the clear public support. Councillor Dixon has already shown that slide illustrating the strength of public support there, and Kate Pike has talked about how this is a workable policy, that we have already got much of the infrastructure that we need in place, and alongside effective illicit strategy, there's no reason why such a policy shouldn't succeed. I won't reiterate this. There is strong parliamentary, there's strong support among the public, regardless of political persuasion, and this is enormously to be welcomed, but needs to be communicated to politicians who might not necessarily know the strength of public support. I just wanted to dwell for a moment as well on why it's so important to have the debate with the public. So this is a graph that looks at the level of cotinine levels among children who have parents who smoke. And if you see there, that line there is when smoke-free legislation came in 2007. But what you can see is prior to the legislation coming in, the cotinine level, so that's the level, indicates the level of exposure these children have to secondhand smoke, largely in the home. It was dropped dramatically prior to the legislation being enacted. And what that tells us is that the debate around smoke-free legislation changed smokers' behaviour ahead of legislation coming in. Having the debate about the harms, the unique harms from exposure to secondhand smoke, changed the behaviour of parents who smoked in their own homes. They took their smoke outside. Having this debate now, if we have it in the right way, focused on smoking, focus on the harms from smoking, will also have an impact on smokers' behaviour, helping us to communicate the unique harms from tobacco. And just a few words on vaping. I know it's been quite dominant in the chat, and I think that the imperative on us right now is to focus on smoking with the public. That's not to say that the action is not needed on vaping, but I think there's pretty clear public consensus that action is needed. The conversation that needs to be had now is more technocratic. It's like, what's the detail of how do you address and regulate vaping in an appropriate way in order to achieve our policy goals? It's not necessarily what we need to focus the public debate on. And our concern, I think, is if we focus too much on vaping in the public debate, then we drown out the opportunity to really focus on this tremendous opportunity to secure a smoke-free generation. So responses to the consultation, really important. I'm sure everybody will respond in detail to the vaping components of the consultation, but the focus of our public conversation, I think, is very much should be on the smoking components. So what is it exactly that we should all be getting out there and doing? Right, well, there are 4 key groups I think we ought to be reaching out to. So MPs in particular, but also peers where we have links to those in the House of Lords. And for that's a really clear ask. We absolutely want to secure their support for this legislation when they have the opportunity to vote. And there are all sorts of ways of doing that: write letters, get meetings, you might even want to do a local petition, who knows. Local councillors also really important, and I think Jim's really articulated, Councillor Dixon articulated really clearly, how you can reach councillors and the sorts of things that councillors can do. They can be tremendously important advocates, and we want them as well to communicate with MPs about their support for this measure. Clearly, our leaders within our own organisations, senior leaders in local government and the NHS, also important for communicating to MPs and for engaging the public in these conversations. And as I say, I think engaging the public directly in this conversation is also really, really important and inherent good, as well as generating support for the policy and getting them to write to their MP is an inherent good in engaging with the public on this, in communicating harms from smoking. Ash already has lots and lots of tools that would help you to write to MPs, etc. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the various cost calculators and various things. We'll be sending out an email afterwards with links to all the stuff that we already have, the template letters that we've produced already, and the briefing that we've produced already. But we will be producing more, and we'll absolutely be doing that in partnership with Fresh, with Ailsa and her team, hopefully with those in Greater Manchester, those in the London Tobacco Alliance, and also in Humber and North Yorkshire. And this is a flavour of the sorts of things that we will be producing. So we'll certainly be doing some template consultation responses to help people think about and frame their own consultation response. We already have got some template letters. We'll be creating a kind of bank of those to share with people so that can help you to produce those materials. We'll produce you a template motion that could go through full council, things like media templates. We will be doing some further polling, which will break down to regional level, help to create kind of local stories as well. And we'll also be developing things like social media assets, and Fresh have already been hitting the streets and gathering vox pops and so forth. So more that will be shared. And we'll be, doing things like, telling you what the hashtag should be and so forth. My final thoughts are really that, it would be great for you to the message to take away from today is to go and get your organisations engaged in this agenda. It's so important, and there's such a massive opportunity. But don't wait for your organisation to get ready. Sometimes it can be difficult to get organisations to do things. You as an individual can get out there now, communicate with your MP, get your friends and family to be doing the same. But also, when you are doing things, please come back and tell Ash, email us and let us know what you're doing. We might be able to amplify that, but we'll certainly be able to communicate across the community as a whole about all the things that we're doing so that we can have this shared sense of what we're doing. And my very final slide is just to remind us all why it matters. These are all pictures of people who have died from smoking-related illnesses over the last 20 or 30 years. And many of us will have similar stories to tell of loved ones that have been lost and before their time, and this is why this agenda matters to all of us, because we all have these stories. I'm going to stop there, and hopefully we've still got some time for.
Thank you so much, Hazel. And yes, we do all have these stories, and that is my dad, top left, who died at 61. He suffocated to death from COPD, and like the vast majority of smokers, he got addicted as a child. And I think that's the big ticket item of the announcement. The phenomenal announcement is around age of sale. So actually, there's been so many fantastic questions in the chat, but one that came up really early on, and I would like to direct this please to Sir Chris Whitty, is the sort of responses that will be most helpful for the consultation. The key question around raising the age of sale. Somebody put in the chat, would engagement from politicians, e.g. council leaders, chairs of health and wellbeing boards, be more impactful than from DPHs, for example? I mean, I'd argue that everybody's really important, and a DPH perspective is really crucial. But so Chris Whitty, who are you hoping to hear from? Is it lots and lots of responses from a large range of stakeholders? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think that the key thing is that we get the widest possible level of responses. It is really important that people who have personal lived experience respond. It's very important that healthcare professionals of all forms respond, but it's also extremely important that leaders of organisations and elected leaders respond, really reflecting the communities and the organisations that they represent. So all of every response is very valuable, and I think it is important for the smoke-free for the age of sale issues. I think an overwhelmingly positive response would help those members of parliament and indeed legislators in other nations, because I should have said this is a four nations issue and a four nations consultation, to understand the issues and to understand the weight of evidence in this area.
Thank you very much. Another question that came up was, is this an opportunity for people to be asking for calling for further measures through the consultation? For example, are there any plans to mandate smoking ban on hospital grounds in England as part of the smoke-free generation, or would you prefer responses to concentrate on the key questions to hand?
My current view is that the range of things that we're consulting on is pretty wide already. So my strong recommendation would be people stick to the multiple questions that they could answer within the range of things we're talking about at the moment. There may be a point in the future to discuss these issues, and I think it's possible that Wales or Scotland may think in due course about some of those issues in relatively nearer time. But I think let's do one thing at a time. This is a huge thing, and I think much best that we get this over the line and get this properly sorted out, and with the support made clear.
Yes,
Ailsa, if I could come in on that as well, I
course.
think you have to look at the parliamentary timetable as well. What's actually achievable in the timeframes. I think as a CMO says, we have to focus on this massive opportunity and all put our energy behind that.
Absolutely. There's another great question about lessons that we can learn from previous campaigns for smoke-free legislation and plain packs, etc., for helping to build political and public support for this measure. And I guess from our perspective, it's making sure that the media don't get distracted. And it is actually, as I think a number of different speakers have said, isn't it? It's like, we need the focus to be on cigarettes, to be on smoking largely. That's the key thing. Chris, you're nodding your head. Anything you wanted to share there?
Absolutely, I 100% agree with what Hazel said. I think the big thing here is getting the smoking over the line. I think that vaping things are really important, and we must reflect the widespread and understandable public concern on youth vaping in particular. So I think I don't want to minimise that in any way, but I think we really need to use this as an opportunity to make the point on cigarettes, and also to help those who are currently smoking to realise this is an opportunity to think again and to find a way out of something which is going to cause them such long-term problems.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And in case anybody did miss it, and with this announcement as well, is also the significant uplift in funding for mass media campaigns. So certainly from a Fresh perspective, we hugely welcome that. We have, because of the fantastic support from our ADPHs, etc., been able to run the kind of campaigns like Smoking Survivors and 16 Cancers. But certainly we really welcome that, as it's a whole system approach, isn't it? It's not just this one singular measure. So I think that sense of welcome. There's another question, and again to potentially, Hazel in particular, but the kind of arguments where we should expect to see from the tobacco industry and their affiliates, and what should we be prepared to, counteract from them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's really important. I listened to a great presentation from colleagues in Scotland recently, talking about getting alcohol minimum unit pricing through, and the kind of approach that they took to sort of inoculate politicians to the arguments that would be made by industry, which I thought was very powerful framing. And absolutely, we expect to hear, and have already been hearing, as we do with any tobacco control policy, that this will cause an explosion in the black market, in the illicit market. And I think Kate perhaps could come back in and kind of reiterate what the CTSI position would be on that. And then, of course, the freedom of choice argument is often one that we hear a lot of, that this is kind of compromising adult choice. I know, we've all CMOs already spoken to this. What kind of choice is it when you are addicted to something as a teenager, which has lethal lifetime consequences? This isn't a question of a free choice in the stricter sense of the word once you talk about such an addictive substance. So those are definitely being the big threads, and you kind of hear the slippery slope argument. Oh, well, you're going to do this for tobacco, then obviously next will be banning chocolate and whatnot. that, you know, plainly we are talking about a uniquely lethal product here with a unique response. And I think that is also really important to focus on. Kate, I don't know if you want to kind of reiterate the position of CTSI in relation to illicit.
Yeah, just from the point of view of the age of sale proposal and increasing the age of sale, the only loser from that policy is an industry which makes eye-watering profits from engaging new smokers every year to replace the ones that die early. So, and they do make eye-watering profits, and they will, I am sure, push back against this proposal, and they will engage all sorts of very expensive PR companies, as they have done before, to push back against this proposal. So we need to have all of our ducks in a row, as Hazel has expressed. In terms of illicit, one thing that we haven't mentioned, or I haven't mentioned, is the very, very welcome announcement of extra funding for enforcement to ensure that the illegal market or the availability of illegal tobacco and vapes doesn't undermine the policies put over in the paper. And that's really, really important. And don't forget, every single time there has been a new piece of tobacco regulation, whether that was the increase from 16 to 18, whether that was smoke-free, whether that was standardized packaging or displays, the tobacco industry has said, oh, it'll lead to an increase in illicit tobacco. And what we've seen over the time is that the levels of illicit tobacco have continued to come down since there was an illicit tobacco strategy introduced in the year 2000. Levels of illicit tobacco have gone down, and that the reason they've gone down is because we've got strong enforcement, and this commitment to enhancing enforcement will definitely support that, and that is the CTSI position.
Thank you so much. And if people do want to find out more around illicit tobacco, I will flag and ask Catherine to put it in the chat, the Illicit Tobacco Partnership website, which is a great repository around what you can do at local level, a strategic approach to reduce demand and supply around illicit. There's been quite a few questions in the chat. I think everybody's very welcoming the additional investment into local authorities. So question, I might pull Simon in for this one. The funding around how local government will decide how to spend the additional investment and to make sure it's protected and it's ring fenced and it doesn't get used for things that it's not designed for. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, thank you. So this money is, as it were, got a double ring fence. So we have a ring fence public health grant we must spend on public health activities, and then we get additional money which we need to spend on smoking cessation, and we mustn't reduce the amount we spend on smoking cessation currently. So therefore we maintain our current investment and we add to it, which is really important and a really helpful way that money's come down. So it will be used on smoking cessation and activities to support that and enable people to quit, and it's brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There's another question that's come in. How can we protect our local councillors from tobacco industry influencing? I wonder whether I can pull in Councillor Dixon for any thoughts then, and also if Chris has any further thoughts on that one.
Yeah, good question. I think that the most useful way of immunising people against being susceptible to the wrong kind of arguments is information and briefing. And certainly we do a lot in our local authority to brief members on public health issues, including smoking. And I think that is really important. To be honest, I have to say that even as someone who's been the lead member for health for actually a number of years, I haven't been approached by the tobacco industry and lobbied. They probably think I'm too small fry, but also perhaps that the door isn't open. So I'm interested to hear if people have got instances of that happening. That we need to know about it in order that we can take preemptive action. I think it's probably more likely that we get lobbied around the vaping proposals, and I think that again is about councils identifying the problem which needs solving and making sure that that doesn't leave the door open for all sorts of spurious and extraneous arguments which would prevent us actually taking the right measures around underage vaping.
Thank you, and really helpful that Ash have just put in the chat also. There's very clear guidelines here in terms of being compliant with Article 5.3 from the WHO and protecting health policy from the interests of the tobacco industry. And that's something that I think we've done exceptionally well as a country, but that toolkit's very useful. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to share on that question specifically?
Well, only two things, I think. I mean, first of which is, of course, it's a free country, but our job is to provide factual, helpful information, and that is the key, I think, to elected leaders, and they will then make the decisions on behalf of society. But that's the best way we can do it. We should, though, be aware that it may not be people coming with a British American Tobacco calling card. It may well be proxy organisations where that is less obvious. And it's worth people looking at what's happened in New Zealand to see how this has been played out by the tobacco industry. And it's often been by intermediate organisations which don't always declare their links to the tobacco industry in reality.
Thank you so much. Really incredibly helpful. And as you say, Chris, you said early on, if people can read the command paper and even the introductory chapter is definitely one of the best things I've read in many, many, many years, in terms of the evidence is very clear why this is needed, why we know the vast majority of the public want this, how lucky we are that we have this continually robust polling, and also the workability of this. There's a strong evidence base behind the age of sale rationale. So that's just, I think we do need to look at that. There's a couple of questions also in the chat, just in terms of misinformation, also in terms of vaping, and I will just remind us there's a lot of resources on the ASH website as such. The OHID commissioned reviews is incredibly helpful as well. So we've got 2 minutes left. My job, I think, is just to thank all of the phenomenal speakers for really giving us their personal perspectives, and particularly Chris, thank you so much for your leadership as CMO. I know you've played a pivotal role to make the case, and how fantastic it is that in 2023 we're at the cusp for the UK to absolutely be leading the world, essentially. And I think for all of us here today, we've made great progress over the last 25-30 years, but it is wrong, isn't it, that we still have so many of our loved ones die on a product that will kill 2 and 3 of them. So let's really focus upon that. A really great response to this consultation. There's going to be lots of resources and support coming out of ASH and other key partners in the coalition like Cancer Research UK, the role of the regional programmes as well. I understand this has been shared, this has been recorded as well. ASH will be making this really important webinar available on their website. But just to thank you all, and I think this is a long journey. The next few weeks are pivotal to get a great response, and then it's also, as the legislative process goes through, to make sure that people our politicians absolutely know that the weight of stakeholders, the public, are behind this. Hazel, is there any final comments from you in ASH that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Ailsa. I think you're absolutely right. It's there's an immediate, rush to respond to this consultation process, but then, we'll need to be in for the long haul and keeping up the pressure through next year as well. And if you're not already signed up to ASH updates, which you probably are if you're on this webinar, then do email our Smoke-Free Action Coalition email address, and then as we produce these resources that we've promised to produce, you'll get those updates. And as I say, please let us know what you are doing locally and what your plans and your creative ideas are, so that we can share them with the rest of the community, and we can all participate in this really, really exciting next chapter of tobacco control.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.